Hey everybody, what is up? It is the Dr. Vibe Show, and I am Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, and I'm also a certified empowerment coach for men. So, as always, I love to get joined, and Glenn's just done something really interesting. He's showing a picture of himself now. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how.
know.
Oh, there
Okay,
you're back. All right, there you
I
go.
got a new
All right.
camera, and I'm making trouble with it.
Okay, well, I'm joined by, and I use this term with all sincerity and all my heart, Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project in Chicago, and also Dr. T, Marvin Thompson from Louisiana. How they New Orleans, how they beat down them Cowboys on the other night. So that made a lot of people happy. And we're just continuing just an ongoing series of conversations, most of them based on manhood. But I think we're going to have a little bit of a turn tonight. We're going to talk about J.A.D.A, Judgments as Data. And I'm going to, as always, when I like to be on these kind of shows, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. I should call you Dr. Glenn Barker by now, but I'm just gonna call you Glenn Barker in a sharp blue shirt. Like, I mean, the man is rocking the house tonight.
Yes, he is.
I'm telling you, I feel like ducking and just saying, he's gonna give me licks after. So, Glenn, as always, you've come up with great thought process and conversation. So lead us in this conversation tonight.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us again and getting informed as well as educated. Tonight we're going to cover a subject that is uncovering another part of our, I'll say, unconscious behaviors, and I'm labeling this J.A.D.A. It is, and it falls into two arenas, like Dr. T has said. It is judgments, our personal judgments, and those judgments that we may hear in the world that are passed on as data. And they have, they're very compelling, they're very convincing, and that those using it are sometimes unconscious about it, and others are very conscious about it. So I'd like to open up this conversation to talk about the two arenas. The one arena being in a personal way. So imagine yourselves as being angry with something, and you've convinced yourself of your reasoning. It makes perfect sense to you. And yet I venture to say, if that was unpacked properly, like we do here at the Mankind Project, what we call clearings. I'm all triggered. I'm angry, and I have judgments. Is to unpack that in a way that says, let's separate first the data. What actually happened, right? And with that alone, that might bring some clarity. And from that data, what have you judged about the person or the situation? And then thirdly, what are your feelings about that? And there's more to it than that, but I think that's a very useful way to go about this. And so tonight, in part on a personal level, I'd like to have us all expose ourselves and our listeners to a series of discussions and going into these judgments, how they're formed, what is the actual data, and how this turns into our feelings, and how all that gets mushed up into a way of acting or reacting to things that seems perfectly natural, but yet unexamined actually leads to a lot of maybe unnecessary drama and hurt feelings. Another whole arena for this J.A.D.A. I'm going to label is in this political arena, and I call it like junk data. It's when really, it's like junk data, meaning someone has taken some data and manipulated. Dr. Thompson, I'm sure, will talk to this in great length. How someone can take data and manipulate that in such a way to further a political agenda. And I think I will lean very much on Dr. Thompson about this. I'm sure you've seen this many, many times, where data is used as leverage, for good or for ill, to put forward an agenda. So that's the overall, and I've labeled this as J.A.D.A. It's junk or jaded data. And I think if we learn to discern this for ourselves and within ourselves, that we can operate less on assumptions and more on facts.
Makes sense. Dr. T, you want to add on to some of the opening comments that Glenn has laid down for us before we go on our journey?
Yeah, I think the whole concept of judgments is really is capsulated in so many other variables. We could call them patterns of behavior that we get into that causes you to examine. And putting this conversation in context, where does what Glenn just mentioned, all the factors that fit into judgment, where do they come into play in your daily life? Well, they come into play when you start looking at patterns for yourself. They come into play when you start drawing conclusions that you're about to act upon. They come into play when you're examining your emotions and your feelings. And I always like to, and I can say this, as I respond to this, I live in this concept of thinking and judgment in this one particular context. All thoughts lead to emotions, and emotions lead to actions, actions lead to results. So if we think about judgments in that context, they all begin with a thought. And I think Glenn alluded to that in the way that we think about it and what things influence our thoughts. You know, data, polls, and those types of opinion polls, and educational data, societal data, economic data. They all influence our thoughts, but those thoughts, again, lead to emotions, and emotions to actions, and actions to outcomes. And simply put, a faulty thought following that train of alignment is going to lead to a faulty outcome. And we're not questioning intent here. I think that's important to say also. At this point, we're not even discussing intent. That comes later when we start incorporating values into judgment decisions and observations that we make. So I think what Glenn laid out has a lot of contextual framework in which to evaluate how we make judgments, and more importantly, how to investigate those things that are presented to us as factual or as affirmed judgments that we're supposed to accept. And a lot of our media today does that. There's a lot of things that are out there that are presented as norms or accepted norms that we're more or less indoctrinated into accepting. And I think that's I'm sure is going to be a huge component of some of the discussions today.
Well, I'm just going to add a little bit into this because I know time will fly by as always when we share conversation, whether it's online or offline. And Glenn, you've broken it down from data, judgments, and feelings. And I just want to jump right into the first area of data. People at different ages, at different stages of their journey are going to get data. You hear it when you have a young boy getting data from father, they're probably not as well equipped to filter that data to make good judgments as much as someone who's older, allegedly. So there are some of the older people that can't filter the data. How do you look at that situation in regards to data management throughout one's journey, a man's journey, a woman's journey?
Thank you, and I think that in part we've encapsulated it in a couple sentences there, Dr. Vibe. What is the essence of a big chunk of the man's work as an adult? To now make the discernments that maybe his father couldn't, or that came from his family of origin, or what he picked up from his community or his tribe. What Kool-Aid has he been drinking, and is this okay with him? The father, say a father, is imparting information, knowledge, and he thinks he's. But along with that, if we hope, in the case of these teachings, that it shows up unbiased and that some way it's useful information, and to the best of any mentor's or father's abilities, going to try to impart, I believe, fairness. But along with that, what's going to come is judgments. What's going to come along with that is his life experience. What's going to come along with that is in that teaching will be to try to advise his son or daughter to beware of certain things. Now, to think that any of us can do this completely impartially and not help bring a guidance lessons piece is ridiculous. So what I want to offer to this part of the conversation is to examine our own, it's really about us, to examine our own thoughts, feelings, judgments, usually reveals, from the judgments we can back into data, what actually happened, what is the truth as best as we can discern. And from that truth, I have judgments, and that's where the story part comes in. I've often talked, and should talk about this today, about the story that's made up. Because if the data is faulty, then judgments are made on that, and with faulty data, a story is made up, and from those judgments, an emotional reaction happens, and that's the way not only do you see the world, I think that's the way it's perceived by you. You know, these are filters. Our judgments and our stories about who we are, what we believe, what's true and not true about ourselves, about people, about circumstances, these are not only from an internal reaction perspective, they are a filter coming in. If I say look around the room and look for blue, everything else fades away. So imagine your mind looking for blue, right? Look for a Volkswagen Beetle when you were a kid, maybe driving around, right? And that's all you see. This is what happens to us. And what I want to say is this work that we do, especially here at the Mankind Project, is to slow ourselves down. Before I get locked into a pattern, or if I have a pattern of reacting a certain way, what is really the data? What actually happened? And what judgments have I made up to examine the story that I attach to those events? And then emotionally, how am I reacting to that? Now, the idea is not to perfect this. The idea is to be responsible. What part of this is my responsibility? In other words, what am I bringing to this to help cause this? And what is truly the effect of the outside world? So that discernment is all we're looking for. Not a cure, but a true discernment.
Dr. T?
Well, I'm going to start with an example that I think most people can identify with, and I'm going to relate it to me personally. I can recall all through my educational career, I think probably from third grade until I graduated high school, I had a belief system, and I acted upon that belief system that I was not very good at math, that I didn't like math. Well, I didn't like math because I didn't believe I was good at it.
Right.
And where did that belief? Remember, I talked about that all of these judgments come from thoughts, and those thoughts are projections. And that belief came from the fact that I overheard a conversation that my mother had with my teacher about my poor performance in math. Well, my mom said to the teacher, and I was in the room, that, well, I wasn't really good at math either. And immediately I drew a conclusion. One, if my mom isn't good at math, then I'm probably not going to be good at math. And number two, hearing my mom say that she wasn't good at math and me drawing that other conclusion gave me the okay not to put in that much effort. And so what really transpired through my entire educational career, at least in public schools, was that my grades, which were barely C grades, I mean, the only reason they were even C grades is because I was an athlete in high school and I put in extra time to make sure I could keep my eligibility. But I gave literally the bare minimum effort because I carried that dynamic with me. And having taught and been in education for 25 years, I've seen that dynamic play itself out, not only in the academic efforts of young people, but also in their behavioral outcomes and their efforts and how parents approach those. So those types of thoughts and those types of belief systems not only create judgments that others project onto you, but they're judgments that you project onto yourself that actually have really long-lasting impacts. And I can tell you, this is the irony of this story that I'm telling you. 2 years after I graduated college and was a teacher, I was actually asked by my district to pilot an advanced math course for teaching an advanced math course for fifth graders for the state of Virginia. Now, here's a guy who barely struggled to get through math, right? Mm-hmm. And here I am now teaching advanced math. And I'm teaching algebra to fifth graders. I'm teaching trigonometry to fifth graders.
Wow.
And what I learned in that whole process, and that was when the reality, I actually came to grips with that whole dynamic as I was a psych major in college. And of course, you've got to take a basket load of statistics classes, and I excelled at those. But those math classes and statistics were real. That was taking numbers and putting it to real life situations. And then I realized that it wasn't math, it was the presentation of math.
Yes. And
also the presentation of the perceptions that were projected onto me. So for 15 years, I made judgments about my own behavior, about my teachers, about the subject matter, which influenced a lot of decisions and behaviors that I had. So that's one of the prime examples of how we make judgment calls based on perceptual data.
You know, this is great because this is great. So I got some feedback going. I got somewhere. Hopefully it's gone. Good. No, this is fantastic, and I want to thank John Haynes III for joining in on the conversation. We'll be opening up a seat momentarily. But Glenn, what this effect between data and behavior? Because when Dr. Thompson was sharing some of his part of his journey, and when he said how his thought about math affected his behavior, he gave the bare minimums. You made that familiar Glenn Barker. So whenever I hear that, I need to hear more. So why did that come out in that effect of data and behavior?
Because absolutely, because Dr. Thompson again does a wonderful illustration of what happens to us all in different arenas. So the actual data was that he was quite good at math. Instead, at a sensitive time in his life, he was subject to making up a story because he didn't have the data. And that's where the hole gets filled. If I really don't know what's going on, I will make up a story that fits. And when you're a young person, it's usually about me.
Yeah.
It's usually about me. I'm defective. This is about me. Even if your parents are fighting, it's about me. If they're getting divorced, it's about me. If the teacher and the parents are right, it's about me. And now, could have been a whole different scenario if knowing this was overheard by this young Dr. Thompson. The authority figures sat down and said, you know, Doctor, young Marvin, I'm your mother, and I really never mastered math, and your teacher here says we're struggling on that. I don't believe for a second that you are 10 times smarter than me. And so what we're going to do is we're going to slow down here and show you just how great you can be at math, and we're going to put in the time. This might have changed the next 15 years of his life, possibly. But in replace of that, since there was nothing there, and no one can see this invisible hole that's created in the psyche there during these formative times, he made up his own story. Well, my mom's no good at math. The teacher says that I'm a struggle, so you know what? I'm just not good at math. And he writes himself off as being good at math. Now, how much of this is avoidable? I don't know. But faulty data, right? It wasn't really data. It was J.A.D.A. It was his judgment passing itself off as data for him. And on those judgments, that story, he created a life of a belief system based on faulty data.
Yeah.
That's the essence of it, everybody. And to examine these...
But we do that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do that quite a bit. And I think one of the fallacies when we talk about data, and let's talk about it's like the new 4-letter word in society today. But I think it's sometimes not put into context. Data is more than numbers. Data is, in fact, experiences. And until we begin to start learning how to examine our experiences and put them into context as they relate to our goals, most times, most people have a difficult time addressing things that have happened to them in the past because those experiences are real. And basically what you get back is, well, you can't tell me that's not true because it happened to me.
Right.
Well, just because it happened to you doesn't mean it has to happen again. And I think that's where the concept of judgment comes into play. Most people really stay in their experiences, and that's a natural thing to do. I do it. I don't think there's a person that's here or listening or wherever that doesn't do that. And it's one of the things that literally stops us from looking beyond our own experiences, because once you've experienced it, you know it, right? You know it. You can explain it. You can justify it. And you, if you want to, you can replicate it. And that's what makes most people feel secure. And there's a lot of people out here who will continue to do the wrong things or have negative things happen, although their motive is positive. And you'll hear them say things such as, I just have bad luck. Or why do all bad things always keep happening
to me?
Why do I always keep meeting the wrong person? Why this? Well, these are things that they can explain. What you usually find is that they're going about trying to resolve those issues with the same patterns of behavior, and they're doing it because they're saying, I know what I'm going to do next. And in some cases, when they say, okay, this person's doing what happened last time, or this is the same thing that's happening, that's actually a sense of security. Even though subconsciously they already know what the end's going to be. And these are the patterns that we see in counseling. We see it a lot in the work that I do with young people. All you have to do is hear them explain what happened to them, and you hear things, I'm frustrated. This has been going on for quite some time, and immediately you just go, okay, let me walk them back through what they thought was going to happen, what they wanted to have happen, and compare that with their thought processes.
Well, and great stuff as always from both of you at Regeneration LBC, saying that slowing down and understanding what's going on is so crucial. And that's what's going on at my son's school. And I believe that it will make a difference. He also joins in and says, and adds that saying, some feelings become comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
That's a key point. And that's true. Most young people, Glenn mentioned the example that I had given. And I think many people fail to, well, I say fail. I think we're all aware of it, but we don't really think about how long lasting it is. Young babies, young children, from the time that they can hear and from the time they can interact with you, from the time they can look into your face. When a baby is looking into your face, they're gathering data. That's how they're able to determine who's their mother, who's their father. They can pick up on your mood. They start picking up on your tone. And those things begin to shape how they choose to interact with you. It's how they begin to assess what levels of control, what levels of safety. How am I going to go through this place and be? There's a natural desire for all of us to be happy. And an infant literally seeks out information for security. Those security components get broken down as we move into larger segments of interacting with different people. And it can become complicated. This is why it's so critical. We talk about early childhood education and family organizations and single parent homes and relationships. If those relationships are, and stress is a huge factor, if parents are feeling stress, trust me, the more stress that child experiences, and even if they successfully avoid it, what they've done is downloaded stress moments to know what to avoid. So it's not like they're not feeling it. They're understanding stress to such a level at an early age that they're having to make decisions about when to act, how to think, and how to respond. And those are things that I can see it in kindergartners when they come to school. You can tell from a 6-year-old who's learned how to manage stress, who either comes in and projects that stress in school or suppresses himself because they're unsure because they don't have that familiarity with those that they're interacting with, and they withdraw. So there's a lot of dynamics that start, and as we talk about judgments, that begin very early on in all of our lives, and they literally shape us. And if you go back and reflect on some of those challenging moments that we've all had in our lives, some of those have been challenging some of those perceptions where I'm sick and tired of it. I'm going to do this differently.
Good. Want to say hello to Clarissa Silva, who's stopped by. Thank you so much for stopping by and catching our blab. As Regeneration LBC is loving what you guys are sharing, he's saying that, and those same comfortable feelings, some on the cyclical poor reactions at times. And he says, "Speak" in capital letters. So he's enjoying what you guys are sharing tonight. Interesting. I'll just put in a little bit of a story of myself that when I was younger, my dad used to give me the strap. And I'm sure we're not the only people who have received the strap. But for many years inside of me, I said, you know what? I will never do that to anyone. But I had to confront my dad with that.
Yeah.
That was data that I had on how to treat people who did something wrong. That was the data that was plugged into me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And a game-changing moment for me was, there was my dad lying on his bed one day listening to his music, and I came out to him and I said, "Dad, I love you. I always will, but strapping me was not right. Not the right data for me."
Yeah.
I made a judgment, and I broke away from that judgment.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "You know what? That's the way I was raised. That's all I knew."
Yeah. Yeah. And
so
beautiful.
Go ahead, Doctor. Yeah, well, that's what this show is about. When we just open up experiences in our lives and other men's lives that we know, and that's the thing, that getting that data, making the judgment, filtering that data. How many people just take it as it is and don't filter and process any judgment on it before they make it into an action, whether it's a positive or a negative reaction? Where our judgment. How can I say our judgment window is for many people is very small right now. It should be very wide and open up and useful judgment. You know, we could talk about many subjects here in regards to the data from, you know, how do you treat yourself? And I know in the second half, hopefully we'll start looking at inside your own J.A.D.A judgment. Right now we're looking at J.A.D.A from the outside from others. So I just wanted to add that little conversation piece.
I'd like to add on to that, Dr. Vibe. So what you successfully were able to do is what we hope to do with men as part of the tutelage. So you can realize, everybody, I hope, that you see, instinctively, we may get it right. Luckily, Dr. Vibe got this right, meaning he's just taken the data of his getting the strap, and he was wounded by that, and he was emotionally wounded and physically wounded. And so, but luckily, what he was able to do is see the blessing in that, meaning what I've learned, I won't put words in your mouth, but what I make up what you said to yourself was, I will never do that. I know the way that feels, and I will never do that to another human being. So you took the wounding, and in ways you've turned it into a blessing, as a gift as best you can. And so you didn't go victim with it. I'm no good. I'm no good. I've got to beat my child. Beating is the only thing that works. That's reenacting the sins of the father. This whole thing about sins of the father could be explained in a whole nother way, meaning the sons will carry out the father's unfinished work. Your father had
that's deep. That's deep.
Yeah, your father had unfinished work, and it was inflicted onto you. You could have carried the sins of the father forward, but instead you broke the cycle. So lucky you and lucky us, this is what brought the man you are today to fore, in part, was that woundedness turned into a gift.
Yep.
Right? So let me just do this, everybody. When something impacts your life, one of two things will happen. You're going to split. Either you're going to go into woundedness, or you're going to go above it. But most likely you will not deal with it, because as a child you don't have the capacity. So either you go down and say I'm part of the problem, or you start to pretend it doesn't exist and go above it. And this is, again, part of an unexamined life of an adult man. This is the woundedness that either says, I'm better than that, or I'm no good because of that. It's an ascender versus, an underground or an over the top instead of straight at it. You actually went right to the source, Dad. And we do this in some of our work. If the father's not available, if he's passed on, Father, this was wrong. And this I do not tolerate in my life, and I have to settle and unburden myself so that I can put that in the context of saying, that's your sins, and that you as a perpetrator put that on me, and I'm refusing to accept that as my being damaged goods because of it. I'm going to now give that gift to the world in a way that says I'm going to do anti-violence as part of my agenda. And other kind of things like that. So that's what we hope for all of us, and I hope now also our audience can start to hear that this is the gift that other men can give each other. When we get together in council, when we get together in groups, and we can start to out our stories, out our judgments, right? Out our own questionable behaviors, and with good men around us, right? That can say, tell me about that story. Glenn, what's the data? What actually happened? What did you make up? How do you feel about that? And from here, what do you want? Right? From here, what do you want? This is done not in the head, and I make up it's not even done well in the therapist chair. This is done in counsel. This is done by having good, fair, strong men around in my life that I can out my stories and out my behaviors in such a way to examine those in a ways that from this point forward, maybe I could start to do something different. Break the cycle, break the chain.
Dr. T?
As we're talking about this, we mentioned in making judgments, we talked about general experiences. But there's another variable that literally drive how people make judgments, and that's their value system, right? And what is that value? Glenn, you and I talked about this earlier in the week. You know, what's the bedrock of your decision making? Because judgments are in fact decision making. And there are two levels of them. They're the conscious judgments that we make, and they're the subconscious judgments that we make. And we make those subconscious judgments every single day in milliseconds when we meet new people, walking down the street. Almost every interaction is a judgment decision that we're making. But even those micro decisions are value-based judgments. And I find a lot of times that is one of the hardest barriers to break in changing people's judgment processes. Because if they're grounded in a belief system,
that's it,
and their values are grounded in a belief system, it's going to influence their judgments beyond their own experiences. I found that to be one of the variables that can literally surpass personal experiences, because people, especially if they've not had good experiences, they will align with people who share a value system so they can hide in the judgments that come from them. And we see that in social norming. And one of the things in sociological terms is called social loafing, right? And we see social loafing at work, but we also see social loafing in judgment calls. If everybody's going here, everybody believes this, I need to choose a side rather than stand on your own. And, you know, as men, we're taught, you know, we hear a lot, you know, I know most the young men that I've ever worked with, and I know my father taught my brothers and I, be a leader, not a follower. Stand on your own and do not be afraid to stand alone. Well, in order to do that, you've got to evaluate. One, you've got to have a value system. And that first value system that in my family started with me. And it's one of the things I try to impart with our young men. You're more important than any issue out here. So first, get yourself together. You know, you got to get yourself together so that when you do stand with a judgment or value, you're standing firm. And if you have to stand against it, you're even stronger. And so the value systems are huge pieces to this judgment component that we're talking about tonight.
Nice. Well, okay. John, I'll let you on after. Yeah. Glenn, do you want to add to that, or do you want we can have John come in?
Amen. Certainly, bring John in.
John, come on in. Thanks very much for taking the open seat. You've been giving some great comments. I said, come on in. Don't just type. Show your face.
I'm here. John. I'm excited, and I wish we had 1,000 more people watching this session, because this is the type of conversation that literally, as the good doctor said earlier, breaks chains and breaks generational curses. And I wish so many more people could have access to this. And I'm so resonating with what you're saying, because as a personal experience, I think the ability to take a joke and not take myself so seriously is what I learned at age 6. And I'm going to tell you how I learned it. And it just goes exactly with what you are saying. You know, I'd come out of church. It was a warm day and we were across the street from the church. And, you know, my family is a joking family. We always talk about one another and, you know, usually take it lightly. And as a 5-year-old, I was a very sensitive kid. But then my aunt pulls me over and she gets in my face. She was like, John, we are just joking. Don't take it seriously. You know, we're not talking about you. And I'm telling you right now, I'm 44 years old now, back to 5 years old. That gave me context as to how to receive people's comments and not to be so sensitive, and to learn to take a joke and to learn to be lighter about life rather than be so sensitive and have my feelings hurt time and time and time and time again and become a victim rather than being able to really assess and see, what is this person actually saying to me? Are they attacking me? Am I powerless or powerful in that? Can I do something about it? Can I leave the situation? I think that just set my whole life in a different pattern than age 0 through 4. So I love what you gentlemen are doing, and this is just great work right here.
Yeah.
Glenn, you want to add to that? Because I know you were definitely showing nods of approval on what John was sharing from his heart.
John was one of the lucky ones. He had a conscious relative that pulled him aside and gave him context. The story he might have made up might have been quite different and shaped his whole life differently. Maybe not from that very moment, but from what he get exposed to. Instead of seeing it as toxic and being a victim, he was able to put it in a context that say to bring into lightheartedness, and that and maybe shoot arrows himself,
Right.
at others, and make it not all that harmful. Around that also, he was able to form boundaries. It sounds to me like he was able to say, this really isn't about me, which at a young age is an incredible feat. I don't see this in 30-year-olds. So, John, you had some great tutelage.
You and me both. You and me both.
Okay, so you had some great tutelage here in the arena of saying, I can make this discernment. This is, this bounces off. This I will let through. This is wonderful. This is what I hope for all of us.
Yeah.
I'm going to reflect a little bit back to Dr. Thompson, and let's make it into a little bit of this idea of we all have a story, and to challenge that story challenges your identity. It challenges my identity, because my story is who I am. So the question becomes, at some point, who would I be without that story?
Large.
Right? Everybody, you got a story. You got a story about women. You got a story about the world. You got a story about yourself. You got a story about people. You got a story about races. You got a story about everything. Some of it's true. Some of it's J.A.D.A. It's made up, or it was fed into you.
Yeah.
The big question to the grown man is, who would you be without that story? And many times that becomes scary, because with that story is your belief system. And who am I if I don't believe that?
I think the lesson that many of us have missed is that your story is a living document, and you have the chance to add to it and to go back and repair stuff if you're willing to do the actual work and do the mirror work that's necessary. Yeah. And so I totally agree with what you're saying.
No. Dr. T?
I love it. Most of everything Glenn's saying is what his organization does. I'm looking forward. I'll be in Chicago with Glenn in a couple of weeks, and I was there a year ago. And I just found it impressive to see men come together and be challenged. And I say challenged because it's a challenge for a man to look in the mirror. And John, you mentioned it's that mirror work, right? Look in the mirror from a non-threatening male who it's like, I just have your best interests in mind, but I'm going to ask you this question. Right. I'm going to love you and respect you no matter what answer you give, but you're not going to get where you're going to go unless you start answering these questions and get comfortable doing it. There's a comfort with that. I mean, that's just the reality of it. You're either going to solve it or you're not, or you're going to stay stuck there. And Glenn, I love Glenn talks about the story we make up, right? All the people you encounter become actors in that play, that script, right? And they either are a part of the problem, and usually if it's not going well for us, it's usually somebody else's fault. And the only thing you were doing was trying to do something, right? And that's where that judgment piece is like, hold on a second. Nobody said you were wrong. And judgments don't necessarily mean you made a wrong judgment. Just evaluate where the judgment came from. You don't have to be wrong to make a judgment that didn't work. You just chose a path that didn't work. And I think people have to give themselves permission to that. We live in a society that has a, off with his head mentality. You either got it or kill him. Like, hold up a second, man.
Right.
The world may work that way, but life doesn't work.
Right.
And there's a huge difference between the world and life.
I'd like to put something in here, if that's all right. There is something that can come from pontificating about how we all could challenge ourselves, but there's also something that I think is very important here, and that is what's at risk. Okay, I'll put it in this. I'll try to put it this way. If I'm going to challenge my tribe, because I don't want to believe, I don't want to drink the Kool-Aid of my tribe, right, and believe as they believe anymore, what's at risk for me? Right? You know what's at risk for me? Being ostracized. I may lose place in my tribe. And one of the worst things you can do actually in actual tribal cultures is to be ostracized. You're not welcome here. You're on your own. You're not one of us. Huh?
Yeah.
You don't belong here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who are you?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I don't know
absolutely.
you. You're challenging me. This is the drama triangle piece as well. Am I a victim, a rescuer, a persecutor? It falls into that. To challenge the collective shadow or belief system that you were brought up with or was within your sphere, you risk getting the out. You'll get the arrows.
Yeah.
You get the arrows because you ain't drinking the Kool-Aid no more. You're a betrayer. You're out. That's what's at risk. On the inside, if you challenge your own beliefs or someone's challenging your beliefs, you'll see one of two reactions. Either pushback, F you, or very slippery. Very slippery.
Yeah.
You can't touch me. You can't touch this. Can't touch that. You're right up against it, guys. You're right up against shadow at that point.
Yeah.
So what's at risk from an internal position? Internally, right? If I challenge your belief systems by asking you to examine and challenge your own story, who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I? That's not. You mean that's not me? That's a story I made up? No.
Yeah.
Yes. No. Yes. Really? Oh, really? Okay. Who are you? Who are you? If that's not you, where did you get that? And who are you? Huh?
And do you need to keep it?
I love that. I'm going to tell you a story, and you said, who are you? That who are you question. We get lost. As we get older, we develop habits. We have these experiences. We adjust our value systems. Exactly, Glenn. And our society and the media influences a lot of those values and their subconscious. We get engineered to do certain things. It used to be the term was indoctrination. Institutions indoctrinate, but when there's a collective effort to do it, it's actually called social engineering. So those social engineering components actually reinforce these subconscious values. But I want to point something out, and this is something my father did with me that not changed my life. I happen to be 11 or 12 years old, and I'll put it in the context. My family moved every 2.5 years. He was a Marine. So we were always constantly adjusting. And it's about 11 or 12, you start, wanting to explore, you're approaching puberty, whatever the case, just losing your mind. And I remember coming to him frustrated about something, and he sat me down and he says, boy, here's all you need to know. You need to know what you like, what you don't like, what you will do, what you won't do, what you can do, and what you can't do. And then you need to know why. And I walked away going, okay, that sounded simple. He actually, in my mind, it was complicated. What the heck is he talking about? Later on, when I came back to him, I said, what do you mean, what do I like? He goes, let me give you an example. What kind of ice cream do you like? And I thought about it, and I said this. He goes, well, good. I want you to do me a favor. Go in the room, make a list of all the foods you like, what you like to drink, what you like to play, da-da-da-da-da. That's what I want you to do. Just do that, and then tell me why. And as I went through that process, I'll never forget it, I started laughing because it was so easy. All of a sudden, I owned it, and I was literally looking at me on paper. And then I actually started questioning. Yeah, I started questioning. I went, wait a minute, I don't really like chocolate. My mom just buys chocolate all the time. My mom, chocolate is great, it's okay, but it's not my favorite. So I actually redefine not what I like, I redefine the word like. Wow. You understand what I'm saying? So it wasn't just what I like. All of a sudden I realized these things that I'm doing are things I'm being conditioned to do, so they're accepting. But if I had my choice, if I had the opportunity to think about it, things that I wrote down are things I had not ever done. They may have been things I'd seen or things I thought about, but that's what I really like. And that changed my world.
Wow. That is, can I just say one thing and I'll just give up my seat? And I want to say one thing in context to what both of you have said, Glenn and Dr. T, in that I wrote down the word risk. And I think as little boys, we are taught to take risks physically, but we are not taught to take risks emotionally.
Oh,
and we
there we go.
And even into adulthood,
there we go.
Taught to do that. And that I think is damaging us. It has been damaging us. And it's hard to unpeel those layers as we get older and get more solidified in who we think we are. And so the second thing is, if I'm really trying to problem solve this whole judgment thing, we spend a lot of time on addressing the youth and helping the youth. And I think that is necessary for the future and their future. Tangential to this is the parent work that needs to take place, the parent rework. Yeah. And I really think that we need to give serious focus to teaching people and educating people on how to better parent and not damaging our kids and planting things in them that will grow that are not beneficial to their maturity. And so that's what I want to say. Thank you, guys.
Now, you can stay on if you want. I'm just reaching out to Strategic J.A.D. I've asked him if he wants to join in. He hasn't said anything yet, so you're more than welcome. And after that last quote, I just sent that out to my Twitter followers about men being asked to take risks physically but not emotionally. I think that's huge. Like Glenn, what do you have to say on that comment? That I know that that's to your heart.
Yes, it is. And John, he's absolutely right. Well done, John. There is a for some reason, and I don't know why, but this is I think very evident. Women and young girls are encouraged to given permission, I should say, and encouraged to open up their emotional lives. And I also think there's some propensity, some hardwiring in women to be more social, to air their wants in order to get their needs met. So women and girls are given permission and actually encouraged to share their emotions, and I think therefore by doing that they get their emotional needs met. Men, on the other hand, I think it's early on discovered that if you show your emotional life or your emotional wound, that you're telling your next perpetrator exactly where to put the knife. And I think that emotional vulnerability in men is interpreted as danger. I am not going to show you exactly how to hurt me, and that is reserved for only a very few people. Mothers, often, your wife, and maybe maybe one or two trusted folks in your life, and that's it. Because to men, vulnerability means harm, means danger. I think for women it means understanding and getting their needs met, not with men. And so what we look to do in our organization is to create safe enough spaces for men to take that mask off, to open that armor and say, please, don't hurt me, but I'm hurting. And I need to heal this wound in this so I don't have to wear this armor anymore. And so John is absolutely spot on. I don't know how we're going to change that for our society, but I do know that as men, we can do this for each other. And in so doing this for each other, we can do this to quit perpetrating on the world and our sons and daughters. Yeah. And so that's my hope, and that's why I do this work in part. Thank you, John. Great
John, that was a great piece. And I see you've typed out, too, a very interesting statement. I wonder how many marriages and friendships and families would have been saved and preserved if men learned to take risks as children.
Yeah.
Dr. T, you've been keeping quiet and listening a lot. Oh, something happened there. Okay, we're good now. Yeah. Dr. T. Feel like we're at a helicopter. Okay, we're good. Dr. T, you've been taking a lot in. Certainly chime in with what's on your heart.
No, this is a great conversation, and it's all coming full circle. But we're getting back to that family piece. We've been talking about men. We've been talking about children, the individual. This conversation is critical because you can look at the various levels and that this issue impacts everyday life and every facet of our society and our culture. As it relates to men and boys, it's huge because our judgments are, and Glenn keeps using this word, tribe. And it's a tribal mentality. A lot of our judgments, and John, you talked about it earlier, how do I stand on my own? And most men aren't able to stand on their own because, one, the culture literally groups us as one, right? And we're different types and so forth, and pits us against one another. But we haven't developed enough strategies to help our young men learn how to stand on their own. I explained to you that little exercise that my father had taken me through. That was a defining moment, not because I actually recreated a whole new paradigm of what like meant and create a whole new thought process for myself, but also found ground to stand alone. I never felt more secure in explaining to my friends why I wasn't going to do something. And I can remember being met with the whole group mentality thing, like, well, we always do this. Like, just because we always do it doesn't mean I like doing it. And all of a sudden, in order to get what I wanted out of life, I had to start breaking away.
Yeah.
And what I got was a foundation and a methodology and approach to build on and get that confidence enough to look at my little small sphere. And as I've gotten older, a bigger sphere to say, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. And as a man, as an individual, and for those who I work with who can't speak on their behalf. So Glenn, you do that as well. I think all of us do individually. Yeah. Those are some of the missing pieces about the judgments in this conversation about J.A.D.A. It's not just making them, but it's so important to understand where they come from.
Yes. What
are the parts of them, and what are, Glenn, you used the word and John used it, what are the risks of us not doing anything about it? That's the huge piece. And that's why I was so quiet, Dr. Bob, because that risk piece is the fear piece that holds us back from even having the conversation to get us here, to get us to where, and when I say we, every society improves when any component as a group improves. If men improves, our world improves. If women improve, our world improves. Right now, men are in trouble. Men are absent. They're just missing in action. And those who are present, they hide and they duck and they dodge. And they find it hard to stand alone because, hey, if I stand up for, as a man, as I understand it in my fullness, who's with me? Mm-hmm. And if I get killed, will I be the last one? Right? That's where we are. And nobody wants to be the last anything.
Right.
Let me, as you were talking, it made me think about this statement, judgment as data. Do we have to make judgments because we are fearful, afraid of, anxious about the gray area of life? Do we constantly seek the black and white in order to be comfortable, when really the gray area is really where all the magic in life happens?
Very true. Very Glenn, I saw the look. Give it to me. Give it to me, Glenn.
Yeah. Well, John, you're a very insightful man. There's many questions in your question. What I'll put this out there. I say you were asked often, don't be judgmental, and I throw up my hands and go, what do you mean? We're all judgmental.
No doubt.
And sometimes if we weren't judgmental, we'd be so naive that we'd be walking off the edge of the cliff every day and not understanding that there's a hole on the other side. No, judgments are judgments. Let's own the fact that we are all judgmental people. That doesn't mean we're bad. Right. It doesn't mean your judgments are bad. Own the fact that you're a judgmental person. You're making judgments all the time. The only danger in that is that there is an impact and consequence to all of your judgments. And if you live a life unexamined, if you don't have a circle like this of men in your life to help you examine your judgments when it comes to the impact and consequences on you and the people around you, now you can have potential problems with that because you go about your isolated little silo world and operating in a way that doesn't move anything or you forward. If that works for you, great. But you probably don't belong in this circle, right? This is for men, right? This is for men who are saying, I understand that I have a story, I have judgments, and it's not quite working for me. It's not quite working for me. So I don't know if that helps, John, but the idea behind this is to say, do we need judgments? Yes.
Yes.
Are they right? Yes. Do we make some of them up? Yes. Are some of them a story? Yes. Are some of them correct? Yes. Are some of them J.A.D.A? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you know the difference is the question.
Right. And will you add context to your judgments?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Do you have the scope to go beyond that to say, if this is not working for me, how do I get good feedback? And this is my call. Before we get off this, we're already I wanted to get to 2 or 3 other areas here, but
next week.
My call out to the shout out to the world here is to say this is why I invite all of you to be in a men's council, to have processes like some that we developed here at Mankind Project to go through the unpacking process in a way that doesn't try to draw you into my victimhood or my perpetrator, but to ask you to examine what I'm bringing in a way that could be constructive. That has got a lot of tolerance for imperfection and a lot of intolerance for the story that I make up. And if I have that, I can adjust my course. I know if I didn't have good men around me to help me examine my course corrections, I'd be on the rocks. I'd be blown by the winds into the reef. And so that's my call out for this. Part of the reason I'm on this and I do this work is to say, this is the wisdom of men's councils. What have we experienced right here? It's the wisdom of a circle of men, right? Who are discerning, right? Who listen, who mirror back, who reflect upon each other, right? To try to raise the bar for all of us. It doesn't mean I'm not going to trip over the wire, but I might not do as much damage to myself and others, right? And if a piece of me is the same as the piece of you, and if I can learn something from John and incorporate it into my life, I am that much better today than I was yesterday.
Absolutely.
And I'll do that much less damage on the world tomorrow because of what I learned with you men today. And not only that, as I step out on my own, and all you other men will do in leadership, it is a very lowly, maybe not lonely, but lowly path. And you're going to get arrows. I need a council in my life of like-minded men, enough like-minded men to know that I'm not alone, that I have counsel, that I have others that think like I think, right? Not in every kind of value. We can be different in politics and everything else, but clarity, men. Do you know the impact and consequences of my actions in the world? This is what brings certainty to a very uncertain path, because I don't know about you men, I got taught very little of this.
Same here.
Yeah, I did not have this counsel going through my life, and I relish in it now. And the more of these that can be set up, and that's part of my charge, to set up these men's councils and give them protocols on how to run them so that we can do this kind of work in hundreds of thousands of places throughout our country and world. I think these in every neighborhood, right? Men's councils that run themselves like this program is being run. What would that mean to their families, to their neighborhoods, to their sons? Even if there's a missing father, imagine a young man sitting in this circle. We should invite some younger men just to have exposure to different men from different walks of life, right? Just to take it in on a cellular level, like Dr. Thompson did in his youth. He may not be able to articulate it, but he'll feel it.
Yeah.
Okay, Glenn, as usual, I'm going to end it off right there. I don't think anything else has to be said, but I know you didn't get to everything you wanted to. Can we continue next week? Do you know where you left off and where you want to continue next week?
Justin, if we could, thank you. Thank you everyone for participating.
No problem. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, we'll do that. What I'd like to go into next week will be what we say, how that's interpreted, and what do you hear?
Beautiful. So before we let everyone go tonight, we'll just give a big thanks for all the gentlemen for taking time out of their positive, productive schedules and how they can be contacted. So John, first yourself, thanks very much for stepping in. And
thank you.
How can people connect with you?
I am on LinkedIn at John Haynes. I'm also on Twitter at Regeneration LBC. I have an About Me page at John Haynes III for John Haynes III. I'm also on Amazon. My book is Me in 4 Seasons, a journal for your journey of change. So
wonderful. Well, thanks. And again, not only thanks for your support on this blog, but all the other blogs I've been doing. I really appreciate it. I don't take it for granted.
I believe in what all of you are doing. So I'm just happy and honored to be here. Thank you.
Right back at you. Dr. T.
Hello, you can reach me on Twitter at Dr. T Educates. Also, on the web at Lighthouse Education Foundation and by email at drteducates.com. Dr. T at Dr. T Educates.
Excellent. Glenn?
Glenn Barker. So I'll say, if you want to start a men's group in your town, in your organization, in your area, please give me a call. Glenn Barker at 312-243-6743. 312-243-6743. You can find the Mankind Project on Facebook. You can find the mankindproject.org on the internet. Find the Mankind Project and MKP Chicago on Twitter. Glenn Barker's on Facebook. Thank you for being with us. See you next time.
Wonderful. And myself, I'm Dr. Vibe, I'm host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show. Also, I'm a certified empowerment men's coach. And I just love what I do. This is one of the things I really enjoy doing. This gets me through many a day. You will not believe it. And hearing men share like this tonight, let me put it this way: if you didn't get into this tonight, your wood is wet. Let me just leave it at that, right? You can touch base with me on Twitter at drvibeshow. Also, if you want to email me, it's dr.vibe at drvibeshow.com. And I love having shows like this because these gentlemen just make it better. They just make it better. So next week we'll be continuing on with this J.A.D.A, but we'll have what we say, what we hear, and it'll be another great conversation. So as always, I'd like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles, and you're a solution for someone's problem. Thank you, Blob, for behaving tonight. Good night.
Good night, everybody.